Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. Welcome to Opera 101 with the Cleveland Opera Theater. My name is Stephanie Ruozzo, and I'm an Education and Outreach Associate with the Cleveland Opera Theater, and I'll be here to chat with you today on our edition of Opera 101. And that is our Monday through Friday daily series where we get to chat about some cool thing about opera so that we all get to enjoy something new that maybe we hadn't thought of before. And we do want to chat. So, please pop your comments, questions, suggestions into the comment box at any time, and I will be so happy to respond in real time. Or feel free to email me at sruzzo@clevelandoperatheater.org. That's SRUOZZO at clevelandoperatheater.org, and I'll be happy to discuss things more fully with you there, or send any info along that you might like. So please do chat with us and engage. And the thing that we want to chat about today is Giuseppe Verdi and the Risorgimento and his chorus Va Pensiero. Why Giuseppe Verdi? Well, this is Verdi month here at the Cleveland Opera Theater. So join us for our celebration of all things amazing about this very amazing composer. And I can't think of a better time to celebrate Giuseppe Verdi and to honor him, because Tuesday, June 2nd, just a couple days ago, was the Feast of the Republic, or Republic Day in Italy. So, a tutti I nostri amici italiani, buona festa della Repubblica. Vi vogliamo tanto, tanto bene. Forza, coraggio, speranza e amore a tutti voi in questo tempo. And so I'd like to think Verdi is looking down on us right now and smiling at his beloved patria, his bel paese, as they honor the nativity of their republic. And so we're going to celebrate that with them right now at the Cleveland Opera Theater and talk a little bit about Verdi and politics and opera. So first of all, who was Giuseppe Verdi? Well, he was this composer. He was a musician born, raised, and educated near Busseto in northern Italy. He actually came from a comfortably middle-class family, despite later claims in his life that he, was raised by illiterate peasant parents. Who would have thought an opera composer likes to be dramatic? I would never have guessed. But he actually was raised pretty comfortably. As he was growing as a musician, as a young man, he was sponsored by a local wealthy patron named Antonio Barezzi. And through Barezzi's sponsorship, he expanded his horizons to the big city of Milan, which was the cultural capital of the North. Remember, we talked about Monteverdi being there and establishing an amazing opera tradition in that city. So Verdi, much later than Monteverdi, was joining that tradition of musical excellence in Milan as he was gaining some notoriety. And while he was working as a young composer, he went through this period that he called, and so we call, the galley years. In other words, he thought of himself as a galley slave who was, slaving away over his scores and manuscripts and having to produce and produce and produce without any rest. So these years, the galley years, lasted from 1839 until 1853, and they began with this opera called Oberto, one that is not performed as commonly today, but it stands out as his first major work. And he composed several major operas during this period, multiple operas a year. And when you think that each opera is a few hours of music, that's a lot of composition. So he was working at a furious pace. And his first big success was Oberto, that he actually gained some notoriety for it, and he had to keep accepting commissions after this one success he had to stay afloat financially. Now, the unfortunate thing for Verdi as a composer was that his second opera, Un giorno di regno, was a comic opera, so a complete departure from the drama that we would normally expect from Verdi. But it was an absolute catastrophe from the night of the premiere. Critics hated it, the audience hated it, Verdi hated it. So we don't like to think about that little crisis, but shortly after, like very shortly after, he bounced back with Nabucco in 1842, and that was his first mega hit. It went viral, as we would say today, and it was his first political opera or first Risorgimento opera, and I want to keep that term in our pocket for just a minute from now. what is a political or Risorgimento opera? We're going to come right back to that. But he finally broke out of this galley year period in 1853 because he was in the midst of his three biggest successes: Rigoletto, Il Trovatore, and La Traviata. So those three catapulted him to not just stardom but superstardom, and allowed him to take a step back from that furious pace of composition and really choose the projects that were right for him, choose the projects that he wanted to do, work on them, revise them, edit them artfully, so that he wasn't just cranking out note after note. He really had a chance to step back and nurture each project. But throughout this period, though, we do see him developing what a lot of opera historians call the Risorgimento opera. So what was the Risorgimento? Well, in English it means resurgence, so bursting forth, this issuing forth of new energy. And so the Risorgimento, or resurgence, was a series of three wars for independence, beginning in 1848 and ending in 1870, where Italian citizens gradually reclaimed their peninsula and built one unified nation, claiming it back from Bourbon and Austrian rulers. And it was also a matter of uniting the independent city-states that had no foreign occupiers but were not part of a larger nation, and also, liberating, or perhaps convincing, the papal states to unify politically with the other states around them. And so it was a matter of unifying the peninsula through a series of three wars for independence over a period of several years. And Verdi's operas during this time were consistently about oppressed people fighting unjust dictators. And he got around the Austrian censors in the cities he was working in by setting his stories in the ancient world, usually biblical times, and very, very far away. So, of course, I'm talking about throwing off evil rulers. But I'm not talking about the people that are in Italy right now. No. Oh gosh, how could you censors possibly get that idea? Well, the thing was, the audience got the idea, and they understood. They understood that these operas were revolutionary, and that they could get around the censors because the censors were kind of flimsy, wishy-washy, and they didn't have any consistency among themselves. So it was fairly easy for Verdi to sidestep them. The people loved this, and they started scrolling Viva Verdi everywhere. Long live Verdi. But the trick is that the censors didn't get, and that we might not get today unless we really study up and know our history, is that Verdi didn't mean the composer. Verdi was an acronym for Vittorio Emanuele, Re d'Italia. Long live Victor Emmanuel, the King of Italy. And Victor Emmanuel was the king of the Piedmont region of Italy. And he led the unification so that he created an independent Italian monarchy by claiming each of these little territories for himself and adding them to his Piemontese territory and his monarchy. So Victor Emmanuel II was the first king of a unified Italy. So when people scrawled Viva Verdi everywhere, they weren't saying long live a composer. They were saying long live this king who's going to bring us together. And Verdi, the composer, knew what it stood for, and he loved it, and he didn't care, because he was crazy political, and his political desires were for Italian independence. He was a patriot. He was so in love with his homeland, and he wanted to see this unification. So what does a Risorgimento opera sound like? Well, basically like any other opera of its time. We're used to that grand operatic style coming out of the bel canto era. And the only big difference in a Risorgimento opera is that the focus is not on individual soloists now. It's on the chorus. The chorus becomes the main character. Well, why would that be? Because he's writing about a group of oppressed people who are unifying their voice and singing together of one mind and symbolically of one heart. So Giuseppe Mazzini, who was an Italian freedom fighter, he actually wrote a treatise called the Filosofia della Musica, in other words, Philosophy of Music, in 1836, so before the Risorgimento started. And Verdi was a huge fan of Mazzini. Likewise, Mazzini was a huge fan of Verdi's. But Mazzini said about the opera chorus, quote, it should be a quote a collective individuality and would, like the people of whom it is a born interpreter, gain a life of its own, independent, spontaneous, end quote. So the message is that the population as a whole nation, is unified, desiring freedom and justice, and all are joined by their identity as citizens of a nation. In the main chorus that we think about with the Risorgimento opera is a chorus from the opera Nabucco, or Nabucodonosor. Nebuchadnezzar, basically, is the story we're telling, the biblical story of Nebuchadnezzar. And this chorus is called Va Pensiero. It's actually labeled by Verdi himself an aria for chorus. Aria for chorus. Now, aria by definition is a solo, right? So that's crazy unusual. That's not something that people would have thought of before. But that really shows you Verdi's state of mind going into these choruses, and what he believed they should be. So to set the scenario for Va Pensiero, it was, like I said, premiered in 1842, and it's set during the Babylonian exile of the ancient Israelites. In other words, a people who have been forcibly dragged from their homeland to a new place where they are enslaved, they are ruled by a tyrant, and they are collectively mourning for the homeland they have left behind. And I want to read just a little bit of the text to you. Fly my thoughts on wings of gold, go settle upon the slopes and the hills, where soft and mild the sweet airs of my native land smell fragrant. Greet the banks of the Jordan and Zion's toppled towers. O my homeland, so lovely and so lost, O memory, so dear and so dead. Mindful of the fate of Solomon's temple, let me cry out with sad lamentation, or else may the Lord strengthen me to bear these sufferings. That's powerful, and his audience felt it was powerful, and they absorbed that power. So this chorus has a clear connection to the idea of patria, fatherland, homeland, and così bella e perduta, so beautiful and so lost. Now, there's a controversy today over whether Verdi meant this to be a protest anthem, or whether that was the effect of some good public relations later in his life. But whether we superimpose this narrative on or not, it has grown to mean that in the meantime. And so when people hear this today, it's a big deal to them. Riccardo Muti still uses this chorus to demonstrate as an advocate for funding for arts education in Italy, and he has used this piece on many occasions during his pleas for art funding. It was even sung during Verdi's funeral procession as his body was being exalted through the streets of Milan. And so this piece has great meaning to us as opera listeners today, to Italians as patriots, and I bring it up for two reasons. The first is, of course, because it's Verdi month, and we can't understand Verdi without understanding this driving passion that led him all through his career. And the second reason I bring it up is a kind of a reminder that all art is political. There's no piece of music or any other art form ever created in the history of art that didn't reflect the desires, the circumstances, and the point of view of the artists who created it. And so what I would urge is, when you feel something wrong in the world, when you see something wrong in the world, go out, go make art, go make music, and you will have made the world a better place because we heard your voice. Thank you. Bye.